Hey, what's going on, guys? In this project, we're going to be doing something a little different, a little fun, and we're going to be using Particles.js, which is a JavaScript library for creating particles or particle effects. And what I mean by that is if we look down here, this is the GitHub page. If we look here, you'll see all these little specks here. These are all little particles that can animate, they can interact with each other, they can interact with your mouse. You can set speeds and sizes and images, and it's really cool. So I would imagine you can do some really advanced stuff with this, like create games and stuff like that. But we're going to look at the basics. We're going to set it up. Basically, once we include the library, we just have to create a JSON file with all of these different values. Okay, I mean, you don't have to use all of these, but these are all the different things that you can do as far as changing the number of particles, the shape. You can use, circles, triangles, images. You can use custom images, size, how it interacts with your environment. So there's a lot of things to configure here. Now what we're going to be building is this right here, and I wanted to do something aside from just the particles, so I put this login form over the overlay here. Now notice when I hover over the particles, they'll kind of move out of the way. So that's a really cool response feature that it has. And if I click, it'll create more particles. All right, so you can do cool things like that, and it's actually really easy to set up. I just learned about this probably a week ago. I've had maybe 3 or 4 people request for me to do something on Particles.js, so I looked into it, and it's easy enough. So I think you guys will enjoy it, and let's go ahead and get started with it. This video is sponsored by Dev Mountain. If you're interested in learning web development, iOS, or UX design, Dev Mountain is a 12-week design and development bootcamp intended to get you a full-time job in the industry. To learn more, visit devmountain.com or click the link in the description below. Alright guys, so we're going to get started. Now one thing I want to mention is if you're using Chrome, you're going to want to have some kind of server and not just open the HTML file on your file system. Because if we do that, let me just show you real quick. Let's see, so if I open up my index.html, this is the finished product. You'll see that the particles are not showing. If I open up the console here, it's saying that it can't load Particles.json, which is the JSON file that we include. Now, to get around this, you can either use a different browser, but I would suggest using some kind of server anyways. Now, what I'm going to be doing is using Atom, the Atom text editor, with a plugin called Atom Live Server. Now, if you're not using Atom, another nice option is to use Live Server, which is actually an NPM module. So as long as you have Node.js installed, you can simply just go ahead and install this. This is what I have running right now. I'm going to just stop it. And you can do npm install -g for global and then live-server. Okay, so this is a really nice dev server. Now once you have that installed, you can simply run live server. Make sure you're in the directory, and it'll go ahead and it'll open it on port 8080. So it's a very simple solution, and if you have XAMPP or MAMP or something like that, of course you can use that. Just any kind of server, really. Alright, so I just wanted to mention that before we start, but I'm going to go ahead and close that up. So what I have here in Atom is I have a folder called Particles Login. Okay, just create that somewhere on your machine with an index.html file. So I'm going to just add some basic structure to my HTML file. Okay, I'm using Emmet, so I'm able to do exclamation and then tab, and it gives me this basic structure. So for our title, we'll just say Particles Login. Alright, now we're going to need to include the library, so I'm going to use a CDN, and it's from JS Deliver. Let's see, can we search? Let's see, so it's JS, it's not on the GitHub page, I don't think. I don't know why. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's on here. I mean, we could install it with npm. Oh, right here. Right here. So it's this link right here. We're going to grab that. And let's go ahead and put in a script tag. We're going to give it a source, and we're going to paste that link in. Alright, so now we include the library. Now we're going to have some kind of element to hook onto. So if we look at the documentation, and you'll see they have a div with the ID of Particle.js, so we'll just go ahead and copy that. We'll put that right in the body. That's going to act as our canvas. Okay, so basically the whole thing where all the particles float around. Alright, so now that we've done that, we need to call this, we need to do this Particle.js.load and then pass a couple things in. So let's create another set of script tags. All right, and we are going to say Particles.js.load, and we're going to pass in here this ID, which is Particles-js. That's going to be the first parameter. Second parameter is going to be the JSON file where we put all of our configurations. So we'll call that Particles.json. And then a third parameter of a callback that's going to fire off when the JSON file is loaded correctly. So let's just do a console log. Whoops, I didn't say console.log. And we're going to say particles.json loaded. All right, so let's go ahead and save that. Now I'm going to open this with Atom server. So let's say packages, Atom live server, start server. And of course, if you're not using Atom, you can use what I showed you, live server, or just any kind of server. All right, so let's open up our console here. All right, so we're getting an error here because it's looking for a file called particles.json, and we haven't created that yet. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll say new file, particles.json. Okay, we also want a CSS file, so I'm going to create a file called style.css. All right, and then for the CSS, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say ID particles-js. I think that's what I called it. Is that what we called it? Yep, so we're grabbing onto this, and all I want to do here is I want to add a background. All right, so I'm going to add the background color of Firebrick. So let's save that, and let's actually give that a height of 400 pixels. All right, so we need to include that CSS file. So let's go to our head area, put a link tag, and we're going to include style.css, save it, and there we go. So this is going to be our canvas. Now we're going to go to our particles.json file, and we're going to add a bunch of stuff here. There's a lot of different configuration options. All right, now for JSON we need to have some open parentheses, curly braces, and then each key value pair needs to be wrapped in double quotes. Okay, it needs to be standard JSON syntax. So the first one we're going to do here is we're going to say particles. Okay, we're going to set that to a set of curly braces, and then we're going to say number. Okay, so number, and then that takes a value, and for the value I'm going to say 100. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this, and there we go. So we don't get that error anymore because we're getting particles.json loaded, and it's reading this config. So now what we have here is 100 different particles floating in our canvas. Okay, and by default, if I click, it's going to create more particles. All right, so this is the default. Now we can change this. We could do, let's say, 10 particles and save, and we'll have 10 floating around. All right, if we do, let's say 1,000 and save, it's going to look like that. But I think 100 is good for now. All right, at least until we change the size of them, because they're pretty big by default. Now we can also change the color. So what we want to do is go under number and put a comma right here, and we can say color. We'll set that to a set of curly braces, and that can also have a value, and we can make it whatever we want. We can use hexadecimal. So if we said black, it's going to change them all to black. All right, but I'm actually going to keep them white. Okay, so we have number, we have color. Next we can do shape. So right here, let's say shape. All right, now shape can actually take in quite a few things. First thing it can take in is a type. Okay, so the default is circle, but we can have square. Save that. Actually, that's not going to work just yet. Why not? Actually, is square one. Now this documentation, the GitHub page, will actually show us all the different values. I guess square isn't one. You can see right here, we have circle, edge, maybe edge is square. I think that's, yeah, edge is square. All right, so we have edge, we have triangle. Save that. Triangle. I think this looks kind of stupid though with these shapes. Triangle. What else do we have? We have polygon, star. Let's try star. Star. Yeah, it looks kind of dumb. We can also use custom images. So let's do a quick search. We'll just do a search for, let's say, white icon. As you can see, I've already done this. And let's grab this right here, this user icon. So we'll say view image, and I'm just going to grab the link. And then what we'll do is change the type to image. And then we can go right under it, and we can say image. Set that to some curly braces. And then this is only going to be in effect if the type is image. Okay? And this can take in a source, which I'm going to just paste the link in that I just copied. Let's go ahead and save that. And now we have these little user icons floating around. So you can use absolutely any image you want here. But I'm actually going to change this back to circle. Okay, so we can also add a stroke, which is a border. So let's say stroke. We'll set that to some curly braces. Make sure we put a comma here. And we can set the width. So let's say a width of 4. And we can set a color. Let's set a color of black. Save that. And now we have a 4-pixel black border around each particle. Alright, I don't really like how that looks. It looks really cartoony, so I'm going to change the width to 1, and I'm going to change the color to a light gray. Okay, and I'm also going to make these a lot smaller later on. So we also have opacity. We can change the transparency of the particles. So we're going to go, let's see, you got to really follow the structure of the JSON document here. So we're going to go right under the shape. Okay, so the shape ends right here. So we'll put a comma there, and we'll say opacity. And this can take quite a few things. First we have the value. Alright, so the value, we're going to set that to, actually it's a number, so it's going to be 0. We'll do 0.5. Let's save. And now you can see, you can actually see through them. When they go over each other, you can see the one behind it. Now you can set a value of random, or a key of random, and you can set a value of either true or false. I think false is the default, but let's set it to true. And then what that does is it'll make some of them transparent, some of them are not, or at least change the range of transparency. Okay, so we can do that. Let's see, so we can also add a key called anim for animation, and that's actually an object, and we can set that to, we can set enable. Let's say true. Let's see if that does. So now you can see that they're actually blinking, so they're kind of animating. And we can change the speed. So speed, we'll say 1. Okay, so that's 1. Let's see what happens if we put it to 10. So now they're going really, really fast, kind of flashing. Let's see what else. I think that's all that I'm interested in with this. I'm actually going to change enable to false though, because I don't want that. Alright, so that is opacity. Now for the size, we're going to go under opacity. So that ends right here. So we're going to put a comma, and then we're going to say size. Okay, so for size, let's do the value. So I'm going to set the value to 5, and let's save. And now you'll see they're a lot smaller. So I like this better. I think it looks cleaner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the number to, what did I do? 400. Let's change it from 100 to 400 and save. Alright, so that looks pretty damn cool. And let's see, we have some other stuff we can do with size. We can do random. So random, I think, is by default false, but we can set that to true. And now you'll see that they change in size. This one's smaller than that one. So they'll go from, I think, 1 to 5 since we set the max to 5. Alright, so, but I'm going to change that back to false. Just know that you can do that. Now we can also add an anim property to the size, just like we did to the opacity. So we'll say anim. And let's set enable to true. Save that. And now they'll fluctuate in size. You can see they're kind of changing. We can set the speed as well. We'll set the speed to 10. Or can we not do speed? No, we can do speed. It doesn't really look like it's much different. What if we did 30? There we go. So that's going much faster. But I'm going to set this to enable false. I'm basically just putting these in to show you guys it is an option, but I don't want that option. Alright, so let's see what else we want to do here. Let's go ahead and use line linked. So now all these options, you can see I'm grabbing from the GitHub page. I'm not using every single one because some of them aren't that interesting. We just did size. Let's do the line linked. And then down here you can see all the different options for each one. For instance, the shape type, we have all the different options here. I think I already told you that though. So let's see, let's do line linked. I think that has to do with, see how they connect to each other? I think it has to do with how that works. So let's put a comma here and we're going to say line linked. Okay, so let's see, we'll add enable. So enable true. Let's save. Doesn't look, I don't know if that looks any different. Let's see, we have a distance value. Remember guys, I'm pretty new to this as well. So distance, we're going to do 120, save. So it kind of separates them out a little bit, I think. And we can also set the color. I guess that's the color of the lines. Let's say color, we'll set it to black. See what happens with that. Yeah, so we can change the color of the lines, but we'll keep that at white. Alright, and we can also set the width. So let's say width, I believe the default is 1, so let's change it to 4. And that actually looks really blurry, but we'll keep that at 1. Alright, so next thing we're going to do is the move. So let's put a comma under line linked and we'll say move. So this has to do with the direction, this has to do with the speed, things like that. So first one we're going to set is enable, and we're going to set it to true. Let's see what happens if we set it to false. Nothing. True. Huh. That's weird. Let's see. I want to look at move, enable, true, false. So it just makes everything go away. That's... We're getting an error down here. I cannot read property R of undefined. Alright, maybe I'm missing something. I don't know. Who cares? Let's just leave it at true. And then let's go ahead and change the speed. So for speed, let's say 10. Whoa. So that goes pretty fast. Let's see what the max speed is. Move speed. It doesn't tell us the max. Or maybe 4 is the max. Nope. What if we change? What if we put it to 100? Whoa, that makes me dizzy. Actually, let's put it to 2. All right. So speed 2. We can also change the direction. So for direction, the default, I think, is none. But if we look here, you'll see we have none. We have top, top right, right, bottom right. So let's try some of these. We'll do top. Okay, so it just moves up. We can do top right. Goes to the top right. We can do bottom right. So you can change the way that these go, but I'm just going to keep it at none. Okay, let's see. We can also set straight. Let's see what straight does. So straight we'll set to true. And that just kind of keeps everything in place, I guess. It's kind of weird. We'll set that to false. Alright, so that's move. Now we also have interactivity. Now interactivity is actually going to go after particles. Okay, so if we go up here, we have this main value or this main key of particles. We want to go under that. So right here, we're going to put a comma. That actually screwed me up when I was testing this out and trying this. I initially put the interactivity under here, and it just caused issues, as you could imagine, because that's not what you're supposed to do. So let's say interactivity. Okay, so interactivity. Now this is where we can define events. So for hover and click. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to say events. And we are going to set for events on hover. And we're going to put a comma right here, and we're going to say on click. Okay, so let's start with the hover. Now we need an enable first of all. And we're going to set enable to true. And then we need a mode. Okay, so for mode, let's take a look at the documentation and go to on hover mode. So we have grab, bubble, repulse, and then we can also do arrays, where apparently we can do more than one. I think what I have for our final project or our final result is repulse, because I want the particles to repulse away from the mouse when I hover over. So let's do that. Repulse. We'll go ahead and save, and now you'll see they repulse, but there's like a huge radius, which we don't want. So to change those things, to change config options for the events, we can go under events, which ends right here, and we can put in modes. Okay, and then for modes, we want to say we want to work on repulse. And repulse has an option of distance. And for distance, we're going to put in 50. Okay, we can also put in a duration. And for the duration, I'm going to say 0.4. So let's save that. And now you'll see there's not such a wide radius when I hover over. So that's the effect that I'm looking for. All right, now let's look at on click. So for on click, we're going to say enable true. Now I think on click is enabled by default because we have that effect as I click by default, and I think that's push. Okay, if we look at the docs right here, on click mode we have push, which just means it's going to push onto the particles. It's going to add particles. All right, so let's say mode, and by default it's push. But let's see what else we have. We have remove, so let's try that. I actually haven't tried that. All right, so save, and now am I clearing it out? Yeah, you'll see that as I'm clicking, they're going away. So we can remove them. We have bubble. Let's see what that does. So, whoa. So that's a bubble. And then if you want to change the config options for specific modes, like we did repulse, and you want to do bubble, we can do that as well. So we'll say bubble. And let's say we want to change the distance. Let's change the distance. Let's say 100. See if that. Okay, so the size is what I want. The size, we'll say 10. So now you see that they're bubbling up, but it's not as big. Okay, but I'm going to keep the click event to push. That way when we click, we can add more. Alright, so we're just about there, guys. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add the login. Okay, I have the effects that I want. And I mean, this is pretty cool. You can really experiment with this. There's more options if you really want to look through it and see the different effects. Maybe change the background color if you want, things like that. But we're running out of time here, so let's go ahead and add the HTML for our login. So I'm going to go inside of the div with the Particle.js ID, and we're going to put another div with an ID of login. And let's go ahead and add a form. And in this form, we're going to have a div with a label. So we'll say username, and let's put we'll put a line break. Let's put an input, type text. Let's put a placeholder. Did I do it? Yeah, a placeholder of username. Okay, so that's what it's going to look like by default. Now I'm going to copy this div, and we're going to put in another one. This is going to be the password. And then we're going to do a button. So right under this div, we'll put an input. It's going to have a type of submit, and let's give it a value of login. All right, so now we're going to add a little bit of CSS. So let's go to style CSS. Let's first add a couple things to the body. So for the body, I'm going to say margin 0, and then let's change the font. So we're going to say font normal. Let's do 16 pixels, Arial, Helvetica, and sans serif. All right, and then we're going to just set the color to a dark gray. Now we also want to style the login. Okay, the ID of login. We're going to give it a background of white. We'll give it an opacity of 0.9 just so we can slightly see through it. And then we're going to set the padding to 2M. Let's set the border to gray, 2 pixels solid. 2 pixels. Okay, and let's set the position, because we want to move it down and over, so we're going to set the position to absolute, and then we'll set the top to 100 pixels, and we'll set the left to 50 pixels. Let's save that. All right, now I just want to add some margin and padding to the inputs. Okay, not to all the inputs, not the button, just the username and password. So let's say login, input, and we want the one that has a type of text. We also want input with the type of password. All right. And then we're just going to add some padding. We'll say 7 pixels. Let's add margin bottom 10 pixels, and let's say border 1 pixel gray solid. Save, and there we go. So I know this isn't terribly useful, but I think it's something really cool. It's something different, something we haven't really done before. And as far as I can tell, it's used mostly for aesthetics and, you know, visualization. I'm sure you can implement some kind of like graphing data, which would be kind of cool. Maybe show like nodes of a social network or something like that. I don't really know. I'm just getting into this. I've actually heard about it from you guys, from a couple of requests. So that's going to be it, guys. One last thing I do want to say is when you guys request videos, that's absolutely fine. I try to take as many requests as I can, but please don't be a dick about it. I actually had a comment on the last video I did where someone actually said, how many times have I told you to create a tutorial on progressive web apps, you know, and saying something like, what is this, like the video I put out. And that just, I don't know, that just rubbed me the wrong way. And I'm not someone that lets people talk to me like that in real life. So if you want to get your request heard, don't talk to me like that. It's not going to happen. I actually don't want to do a video on progressive web apps now because of this dickhead. I mean, it's something I do want to do, and other people have asked me, so I will do it eventually. But just know that when you talk to someone like that, you're not gonna get what you want by doing that. All right, and you know, a lot of you guys actually hopped in on that comment and said, you know, don't, you know, why don't you just unsubscribe or go somewhere else or something? And that's awesome. You guys are, you know, like I always say, 99.9% of you guys are friggin' awesome, and that's why I continue to put out free content. But you know, just be respectful. That's all I'm saying. All right, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I am actually going on vacation with my family for 3 or 4 days, so I may not have a video out for maybe 4 days or so. I'm really not sure, but thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.